the advertising landscape as a whole is a system that is designed to take your money from you as fast as you're willing to give it to it and provide as little value as possible in many cases, unless you are very specific about how you use that system.
Welcome to the KayaCast, the podcast for cannabis businesses looking to launch, grow, and scale their operations.
Jake, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks for having me, Tommy.
So you founded and sold a mobile media company, advertising platform. What got you started and thinking that, hey, cannabis, I'm going to solve cannabis advertising?
Yeah, so I halfway joke when people ask me this and say that I got tricked into the cannabis industry, which is partially true. What happened was in 2018, I was working on a advertising platform that I've been building for a couple of years, and I met some of the early investors in the cannabis space, right? This is back when people were more excited than they currently are about cannabis futures. And they had a project they were trying to bring to market. And it was an app. And so I've spent a lot of time in the app industry and launching apps and doing advertising marketing around that. And so I offered to help them bring that to market because it had not launched yet. And what I discovered is you could not do advertising for cannabis. So I was trying to build a GTM plan, and I was like, we can't really do that without being able to advertise effectively. And so I said, what might be a better idea is to create a marketing platform because there isn't one. Several conversations and weeks later, they agreed that was a good idea and then asked me to come on as the CEO of the company. And that's how I ended up in the cannabis. That's a short version, but that's how I ended up in the cannabis space.
Oh, wow. It's
Yeah.
indicative, though. There's a problem, and entrepreneurs, you run towards that.
Yeah, like a moth to the flame. And hopefully you try not to catch yourself on fire too much on the way there. It'll be almost 8 years
Mhm.
since we embarked on that journey, and it has not been boring.
So tell me, how does MediaJel tackle the problem that I think advertising in the cannabis industry is one of three biggest problems this industry faces.
Yeah, so we had two big problem sets to deal with when we started off. One was that no one would take the ads, right? I have a background in working in programmatic advertising. Just if you don't know what that is, it's like the stock market. But when you see an ad show up on your phone or your desktop, you're on a news site or something, what has actually happened is an auction took place and it completed in about 150 milliseconds. So your website launched, it sent a signal to this auction house and said, I'm this phone, I'm in this person. Here's some information that we might know about this individual. They like dogs, whatever it is. And then the advertising system is what we do today is we bid on behalf of the advertisers, right? So we're trying to find the right people or devices or houses to serve ads to. Now, the problem is that we wanted to buy advertising, but no one would take our dollars because the cannabis, right? Most of the ad platforms are controlled by large publicly traded companies, Google, Facebook, et cetera. And even today, those types of companies, the risk reward situation for them doesn't make sense. So even if it's tens of millions of dollars, Meta is not going to risk their NASDAQ listing for taking that money, right? So those avenues were just closed. So we had to solve that problem first. And we solved that by going to Europe and finding a independent European owned supply side platform, the people that actually work with the publishers that write the checks to the publishers, meaning the apps, right? And they were trying to get a foothold in the US and do things and get into verticals where Google wasn't necessarily as dominant. And they agreed to sort this part out for us. And that took a while. We had to go through and explain that we understood the compliance and the laws and where we could serve ads and not serve ads. And we had to go and have them pull all the publishers and ask, will you take CBD ads? Will you take cannabis ads? And we actually got more than we thought we would initially. And of course, since then, it's gotten much easier. We built the first cannabis-approved sort of supply ecosystem. That was the one problem set. The other problem was, again, we couldn't use the tools that marketers use for digital advertising. We couldn't use Google or Facebook or any of those things to measure the efficacy of the advertising. So my background is in building software platforms. So we built those tools ourselves. The crux of which is really attribution. So attribution meaning you're spending dollars in advertising. What are those dollars doing? And so we built a platform that does that. And we integrated with multiple different ad platforms to do that. But it basically means when your ad is running on someone's device, a little signal or a cookie or a pixel is going to fire. And then we also integrated on the other end. So we started with Jane and Dutchy, the major e-commerce platforms, and we can pick up a signal when someone makes a purchase, and then we can tie that to advertising that happened in between up to a 30-day window, depending on what your personal philosophy is about attribution windows, which varies wildly. So those are the two pieces. We put those together. It took us a little while to do that. And that is the crux of what we do today. There's a lot of things wrapped around that we do that covers different parts of marketing, but I'll pause there to see if you have questions on that, because that's a little bit to digest.
You say that so nonchalantly. You obviously know how much of a problem that is. First, finding space, but also attribution. Attribution is king in marketing. We have a problem with attribution, and we don't have nearly as much of a problem than the cannabis industry. It's huge.
Yes, it is large. And each marketing channel presents its own attribution. In the early days, we focused a lot on geographic attribution because that was the last platform that my co-founder and I had built, was around measuring device observations and seeing who had walked into stores. And we did kind of walk-in attribution, meaning that we served this ad to this phone, and then we saw that phone inside of this location at some later date. The problem with that data is it's a pretty small sample size. So if 100 people walk into a retail location, only about 5, maybe plus or minus 2 of those people are on a device where they're sharing their location and they're using some app that's getting that location. So what happens there is you end up having a conversation about statistical modeling and saying, and this is what Nielsen does, right? Which everyone loves. Maybe not everyone loves Nielsen, but Nielsen is the standard of this is a measurement. But Nielsen doesn't measure very much of the market. It's less than 5%. And if you are a mathematician, technically a 5% population rate is extrapolatable. Is that a word? You can extrapolate it into something that is meaningful and that a lot of the advertising industry is based on. However, that conversation is more difficult to have in smaller businesses. And so that's one of the reasons why we, as quickly as we could, integrated directly with the e-com platforms so that we can say, here's a specific order number. You have the customer. We don't collect any PII at all, right? So we have a order ID. We might have a customer number. We know what was purchased. And then we can anonymously tie that back to an ad that was served. And it's usually not one ad. It's usually 7 to 10 ads over a 10 to 14 day period is usually the window. Another thing that people, when they come into marketing, if you don't have a lot of experience in it, most people just think of like Instagram, right? It's just, oh, you see an ad and you buy the thing and it goes to your house. But in normal marketing, what happens is you have to serve someone 10, 20 ads over a time window. And cannabis specifically is not something that people usually buy on an impulse, right? You're not like playing Words with Friends and see an ad and you're like, oh, I'm going to buy cannabis right now. They're probably going to go on Thursday and you served them the ad on Tuesday. So you have to be able to show that buyer's journey in terms of the touch points.
Do you have any data, and you probably do, on companies prior to using your platform, what they were doing? They're pretty much going in the dark with their advertising.
Yeah, we still run into some dispensary owners that don't even know that they can do digital advertising, right? And so a lot of the marketing historically has been like field marketing, right? Like in-person activations, field marketing, promos, offering discounts to retail. If you're a brand, offering discounts to the retailer so they can then offer a discount, and then text messaging and email, right? I mean, text has its own issues with sometimes the carrier shutting you down, but those are in theory direct to consumer channels where the consumer has like, I've given you my number, I've given you my email address so that you have less restrictions there. And that's primarily what people have been doing. Billboards, magazines, field marketing, but opening up digital. And even today, we are at the point now where we can run TV ads on like connected TVs. So not anything within like an FCC license, like cable. We can't do that because it has F for federal in front of it. So that doesn't work. But most people are using apps on their connected TVs now, right? You're on Roku, you're on Netflix, you're watching CNN, but you're watching CNN on the CNN app, which is technically no different than the CNN app on your phone. And so that becomes a policy decision by the publisher and not a government oversight thing. So we can run ads on TV, and we're running ads for, and actually I got to see one of our clients' ads the other day on TV. I was at a restaurant having lunch and I saw an ad that we created. It was running on TV, which is a pretty cool moment for me. I was very excited. Everyone else in the restaurant was confused as to why I was making so much noise, but
Can you walk me through? And I am a novice, and I'm sure
Mhm.
that everybody listening is completely, this is new to everybody. I had no idea before I met you that online advertising is legal in the cannabis industry somewhat. Where would people see ads online if I was on my phone? Where would I go to see an ad?
Yeah, so basically anything that's outside of the walled gardens meaning like TikTok, Meta, Facebook, Instagram, and those are still policy decisions that are held by those companies. But anywhere, any website you're on, reading the news, Reddit, any app you're on, games, video sites, whatever it is, anytime you see an ad there, those ads are generally what's called the open web. And that is the programmatic advertising exchange is how that works. And it's like the stock market. People have seats, like we have multiple seats on the exchange, and we use those to buy ads. And so it's really everywhere at this point. There are certain publishers or media companies, like we're not running cannabis ads on the Disney Channel, right? That's not
Mhm.
happening. But pretty much everyone else at this point. So like CNN, Fox News, Barstool Sports, like all of those types of sites, and then most of the apps that are advertising driven as well, except for the social media ones because they control their own walled garden.
How dialed in can I set the audience, geography wise and demographic wise?
Yeah, so you can get as detailed as you want. And the only issue is that when you stack too many audiences together, you end up with too small of a audience size, right? So first off, everything we do has geography, right? A layer we haven't really talked about is the compliance layer. There are literally thousands of laws in the US today about running cannabis ads. So every state has its own laws. Sometimes counties, sometimes cities have their own laws. That means that by default, we have to know where we're serving the ads because it has to be a state where it's legal to begin with. Then you've got a different set of laws, which is each state allows different types of things in the advertising. Some states you can show a picture of the product or flower, others you cannot. Some states are like you literally can just have black and white ads. Canada is a lot like that, actually. Canada's advertising restrictions are some of the strictest, and it's an extrapolation of the old like Joe Camel fiasco, right? Where the idea is that they don't want you trying to serve ads that are appealing to minors, and in some states they don't want you to have advertising that encourages purchasing in any way. So you can't use the word buy, for example. So there's all of those kinds of restrictions. So we're always going to track geo, and we're always going to make sure that where the ad is running and what's in it is compliant. And then you get into the next layer. Once you're like, that's table stakes, let's not get in trouble. Then you start talking about demographics. Do you want to target by age, gender, income? Do they have dogs? Those are your basic demographic layers. And then you get into semantic targeting. Semantic targeting meaning that we are now going to decide what the content is on the particular page that someone is looking at, right? So let's take a news site. A classic example of semantic targeting is that airline companies do not want to have their ads next to articles about airline crashes, right? That's how this starts, right? Which is we don't want to have our ad there. So you can turn that around the other way though and say, I only want to show my ads in particular articles that are about this content. An example of that would be, it could be like a parenting blog that you would not normally target for a cannabis ad, but there might be an article about CBD for parents or whatever it is. In that case, you want to target that specific article on that site, but you don't want to target the whole site in general. So that's semantic targeting. And you can do geographic retargeting, which is that we have the ability to draw polygons around anywhere in the US, identify devices that have been seen anonymously. We don't know who the devices are, but we know that this phone was seen at the dog park, for example, and I'm selling dog food. And at that point, I don't really care about much else that I know about that consumer. I know they're in a dog park, so there's like a 90% chance they have a dog, right? So I'm just giving you some examples. There's a whole world of targeting. We can do retargeting based on email lists. You can do lookalike targeting. There's a lot of different options. To answer your question, it's pretty much as detailed as you want.
Wow, that's so cool. I'm even thinking to myself, gamers
Yep,
are a huge market for cannabis.
they are.
Huge.
We can also retarget based on search intent, meaning like people that have searched for things, specific
Mhm.
topics. That works very well. And then the sort of recipe here is, what is the geography? What does your creative look like? what kind of audiences are you targeting, and then which publishers or applications are you trying to put them in. We usually start a campaign with a somewhat broad canvas of here's some kind of big picture, and then we see what the data tells us because we get a lot of data. We serve millions of impressions every day. And a lot of the times when we start working with an advertiser that has not done targeted advertising like this before, like maybe they've done billboards, people have misconceptions about who their audience is. And what you mentioned is a lot of what people come to the table with, right? They say, okay, we want college students and gamers and people to go to music festivals, because those are pretty obvious, like high intent cannabis audiences. But it turns out there's a lot of people in this world, and there's a lot of different types of cannabis consumers. I'll give you my favorite example is we had a company, actually it's an accessory company. They sold bongs, right? And they were doing online, D2C website, e-commerce. And we had this conversation, who is your audience? That's usually where we start. And they said college students and gamers. And so we built those audiences and we ran the campaign like that. And it was not performing very well. It was like maybe a 1x-ish ROAS, meaning they were, for every dollar they were spending, they were getting an equivalent number of dollars in sales, which is not a good return for advertising. You really need to be like 3x because you have cost of goods and everything else, right? After about a month of having gathered enough data about their audience and what was going on their website, our head of media figured out that they were just very wrong about their audience. Their audience, the people that were buying their product, were suburban moms who bake sourdough bread.
What?
Yeah. So, and then when we figured that out, we changed the targeting, and the ROAS did exactly that. It went from 1x to 3x.
Who would have known?
Not us. Like, I didn't know that. And that's always, it's the fun thing about like working with a new brand is seeing where their audience is, because you almost always find some kind of surprises like that.
Yeah. I was going to ask you, what does a successful campaign look like? How long should you be running in order to get enough data to get answers to know you're right or wrong and to move forward?
Yeah. So we generally flight a campaign when we kick something off in a 90-day campaign. So 3 months. And usually by around week 6, like the campaign performance between week 1 and week 6 is pretty dramatic. Because like I said, what we don't want to do is like not find the suburban moms on accident, right? So we keep everything compliant and we put things into reasonable categories. And then we look at what the data tells us, right? Which audience segments are performing better than others, which geographies, which creatives in which geographies on which publishers. An example that I will give, which is a little bit cheeky, but for cannabis, this is real data, right? So for dispensaries, I use this example. Dispensaries in Michigan that we've worked with have a very good conversion rate on manga and comic book apps, right? But if you go to West Hollywood, it's Grinder. Grinder kills it, right? And so, and there's also a combination of what the creative is. Like we've done work in California with, I use these examples because they're extreme, Pop and Barkley, which is a very kind of health and wellness focused brand, and then Heavy Hitters, which is a very like cannabis aficionado brand. The specific publishers that the ads are running on perform very differently, right? So an example would be like on a health and wellness blog, for example, like Pop and Barkley is going to do much better than Heavy Hitters will, but World Star Hip Hop performs really well for Heavy Hitters, right? So it's a big multivariate issue to sort out, and we approach it with some expertise, but we like to keep an open mind because we get surprised all the time.
What would be the minimum somebody should spend in order to get enough information back?
So you have to think about it in the size of the audience in which you're targeting. So for example, you could spend $5,000 on programmatic around a store location over a few months and get some interesting data. But you couldn't spend $5,000 on a national e-commerce campaign because it's too diffuse, right? You need to be able to know that you're going to hit your target at least 10 to 20 times in that time period to get enough. This is a normal advertising adage, and some people say it's 7, some people say it's 20. But if you haven't seen a brand before as a human being, you need to see that brand somewhere around 10 to 20 times before it registers in your brain as a real thing. It's not just a random phone number on a wall. So if you put that into context, that means that the size of your budget needs to be smaller if you're in a smaller area, because what you don't want to do is serve one ad to 10,000 people, right? You want to serve 10 ads to 1,000 people. Does that
That
make
makes sense.
sense?
Yeah, that makes total sense for sure.
Yeah.
The broader the market, the more you have to spend too, because
Yeah.
you're
And we
just
have
covering the whole
customers,
market.
advertisers today that are doing that, like they're spending $5,000. And then we have other advertisers that are spending $200,000 in a given month,
Yeah.
right? And those larger advertisers are advertising. They might have 10 locations inside of a state. Again, we're going to serve the ads in a radius around that state or to specific zip codes where we've found affinity. Zip codes are an interesting study too. We could talk about that for a long time. The behavior of zip codes, people are more likely to behave like their neighbors than they are like people on the other side of town. And so you see distinct patterns even inside of not even large cities of which zip codes are going to have more affinity to the brand. And that's where the brand comes into play as well, right? The brand experience matters. Are you like a super bougie brand or are you a more approachable lifestyle brand? These things all come into play.
I was going to ask you, what should a company have in place to set themselves up for the most success before a campaign?
That is a very good question. There are companies that come to us and want to do advertising, and we actually tell them that we do not want to take their money. And that scenario is when they don't have their post-click experience, their funnel set up correctly. 'Cause at the end of the day, it's a math game, right? You're going to serve a certain number of impressions. A small percentage of those are going to get clicked on, or people are going to go find your site later. And then another small percentage of those people are going to make a purchase, right? So if you have, we'll take e-commerce because it's the easiest one to measure. If your conversion rate on the e-commerce sites, let's say it's 3%, which is pretty good, right? You should be able to do pretty well with a 3% conversion rate. Now, if your conversion rate is only 1%, I mean, only 1% of the people that go to your website make a purchase, that means that your media cost is 300% because you have to buy 3 times as many ads to get the people to your site to get to the same number of sales. So if you don't have, the first question is, what is your conversion rate? And if someone doesn't know the answer to that, you have to stop the train right there and say, okay, we got to take a step back and understand what your actual conversion rate is. If your site doesn't look good and it's not easy to navigate the cart, all of those friction points cost money, right? So you want to feel like for online sales, your website or your landing page is your salesperson, right? A lot of entrepreneurs are passionate about the product that they've made and are under the mistaken assumption that everyone would be able to recognize how great their product is just by seeing a picture of it, right? And you really do need to actually make your digital engagement platform your salesperson, right? So you have to have social proof and good photos and explaining why you're better than other people. And if those things are not in place, then it doesn't make sense to really get into paid media. We tell people like, take the money you're going to spend on ads and make a better customer experience instead. And then come back to us later.
That makes sense. Yeah, just optimize your site, make sure that buying experience is there, or at least to a point where you want to start spending money to bring people there.
Yeah. And you know what? Today it's easier than it ever has been to get that done, frankly, with AI. The tools exist today. You can go string together a couple of prompts with the right tools and build a really nice landing page in 20 minutes.
It's so true. If there's one thing that AI has solved, is that you can get up and run pretty quick.
Your copy, your layout, everything can be like nice and smooth. And these are things that you would have had to have spent tens of thousands of dollars on even 18 months ago. And also find someone who's actually going to do it, right? And this is, as a marketing company, this is something we run into a lot because there's no license to be a marketing company. Anyone can say they're an agency, right? So the bar is very low. And also anyone can technically run ads. It's not that hard to go and figure out how to buy ads. And so we run into a lot of people that have been burned by people that didn't know what they're doing. The copy and website stuff has largely been solved if you want to take the time to go out and use the tools.
Mhm.
It's pretty exciting. We could go real deep into that, but we'll be
I
here
want
all
to go
day.
deep.
Okay.
That sounds fascinating.
Yeah, I would say where we're at today, if you were to go and spend a couple days on YouTube, figure out which one of, there's a lot of different tools you can use, but most of them will give you a reasonable output in terms of being able to say, go to Claude Code or Lovable or whatever it is and just say, this is my product. I want you to build me a high performing landing page designed for e-commerce or whatever it is that you're trying to do. And within a little bit of iteration, you will end up with something that will convert, assuming that your product is decent and is something that people want to buy. That part is effectively free now if
Mhm.
you have the initiative to do it.
Yeah. So let's say I'm a business, I've done that, and
Mhm.
we have it dialed in. What should I have in place other than that to set myself up for the most success? And how would a campaign, what would it look like if I started a campaign with you guys?
Yeah, so let's assume that you have first of all, a product that some number of people will want. Then you've gone and made a nice landing page that demonstrates the value of your product to someone. And now you want to go out and do advertising. There's a lot of different channels, but we're going to talk about paid channels right now. Organic, we can talk about also like SEO and all that. But if we're going to talk about buying traffic, then your main options are going to be display advertising, which is what we've been talking about, paid search, right? So that's buying your ad placements on Google or Bing or one of the search engines, or social, right? Paid social. Now, we focus mostly on display advertising because we don't have to do anything weird, specifically with cannabis. You can run ads on Meta, but they don't really want you to, and you get shut down and they might shut off your brand page. Google's kind of in the middle. We do and have been running ads on Google for a long time, and they're lightening up even more now. You just have to know what you can and can't say, right? There's certain words that you can use, certain words you can't to be not in trouble. And then it's going to be about with display or programmatic advertising, you are optimizing by effectively by removing the traffic you don't want, right? So we talked about this earlier. You want to put these filters in, right? So let's say there's a billion ad impressions. I only want people in this area on these publishers that match these demographics and have this purchase history. Now you've narrowed the lens down. And that's what you want to do, because I talked about your conversion rate being 1% or 3%. The same thing happens when we're talking about the top of the funnel, right? Marketing is largely described as a funnel, right? At the top, you have awareness. In the middle, you have engagement. At the bottom, you have conversion. There's some middle layers if you want to get into the details, but those are the three buckets. And it's usually shaped like this. So, you're going to run like a million ads, literally a million ads, because they're not very expensive individually. Like a standard cost per thousand impressions for someone is going to be like, let's say $7, right? So for $7, you get 1,000 impressions. So you get a lot of impressions when you're spending thousands of dollars. To the extent that you can narrow the top of the funnel, it becomes less expensive all the way down, right? So the idea is you want to figure out all the things you don't want to bid on. The advertising landscape as a whole is a system that is designed to take your money from you as fast as you're willing to give it to it and provide as little value as possible in many cases, unless you are very specific about how you use that system. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. It's true. It reminds me of just, even for us, we're a B2B company, and just a small percentage at the top yields tremendous return at the bottom. Huge. So if you're just X% efficient at the top, it's incredible.
Yeah. And so that's what I was saying about how the performance gets better, because over time, we can backtrace the conversions, right? We can see which path, there's a million paths that came down, right? And most of them just fall out like a pachinko machine. But the ones that go to the bottom, if you can figure out where they originated from, then you can start to narrow your aperture again,
Mhm.
right? Because ultimately, if you bought 10 impressions and that resulted in a sale that was $100, those impressions, the ones that actually like converted, those are pennies, right? But you're spending dollars to find those.
Yeah.
And so generally, when a campaign starts by about the sixth week, maybe the end of the second month, the performance has usually doubled or tripled than what it was in the first couple of weeks, because we can narrow down who we're trying to target.
Yeah. It's fascinating. My SVP of marketing always tells me about how important it is to have a brand, understand who your audience is, and if
Mhm.
those two align, then that's like the foundation of everything, pretty much. And it's what you've explained.
Yeah, and if you bubble it up to marketing 101, and I think a lot of people skip this step and get right to like advertising. Oh, I want to run ads, and here's my product. what you need to remember is that marketing is about storytelling. Human beings connect with stories. That's how you can send a message. And whenever your company, whether you're B2B or B2C, there's a value exchange in advertising. And the value exchange is relatively straightforward. The consumer is giving you their time and consideration looking at your product, right? Or your ad. And in exchange, you need to give them some sort of value. The easiest value is usually some sort of discount on a product that they're probably interested in, right? Hey, you can have this product that will cost you less money. I like to use insurance companies as an example because every insurance company ad, most of them, all states a little different, but most of the insurance companies use humor. And they use humor because insurance is boring, right? And ultimately, like maybe you say 15% or whatever here or there, but they're using humor because that's the value exchange that they're giving to the consumer is they're giving them a little tiny slice of entertainment in exchange for hopefully some brand equity for that brand in consideration later. So if you take those two concepts and put them together, which is that humans resonate with storytelling and marketing is a value exchange between a company and a consumer, that gives you a good foundation for thinking about how you want to advertise.
Yeah. The psychology of it is, we can talk about this all day. Most advertisers probably have a psychology background, I'm assuming.
There should be some level because it is psychology. And if you want to be like completely like mercenary and capitalist about it, you could just say that advertising is a mind control game. Because effectively what you're trying to do is move someone's opinion towards buying your product, right? And you're
Yeah.
doing that through a variety of methods. Sometimes the value exchange is emotional, right? Like the Budweiser ads in the Super Bowl, right? They've got the Clydesdale and Farmer or whatever, and it's all very dramatic music, and it gives you this Americana, heartwarming kind of feel thing, right? So it is psychology, right? So are you giving someone a deal? Are they excited about getting something for cheaper? Are you appealing to their inner emotions about creating a bond between your brand and their like sort of emotional psyche? Are you trying to entertain them? Right? It does all come down to that because at the end of the day, we're emotional beings, right?
Mhm. Is there any data on, depending on how you want to communicate your brand and which emotions you're trying to pull out, how long it would take for you to convert a customer? Or are they all just the same? It's just which way is more effective for you?
I would say that actually more like they're all different, right?
Mm.
So what is the story you're trying to tell? The reason why discounts or act now, get two for the price of one. The reason why a lot of advertisers use that is because it's a relatively straightforward marketing exercise. You don't have to build a sort of a complex emotional relationship because you're really just appealing to value, monetary value. But if you look at luxury brands, let's take BMW or Mercedes, for example, the majority of the budget that they're spending and that they're targeting is actually to their own customers, right? And there's two reasons for that. The average buying cycle for a car is like 4 to 5 years. So for a brand like BMW or Mercedes, they're going to spend quite a bit of money in advertising. They spend huge amounts of money, but they're actually spending a significant amount of money at the individual level advertising to their existing customers so that they feel good about the purchase that they made in the past and they're more likely to purchase again. There's even, you can probably find an example of this in your own personal life where you bought some product and it was maybe a newer product or a newer restaurant or something, and then you saw an ad for it and you're like, oh, hey, I went there. That interaction right there is a post-purchase validation of something you did in the past that makes you feel good about that purchase that you made because you didn't just do it all alone by yourself. It's obviously in the zeitgeist and you are like part of some sort of trend.
That's actually, you're blowing my mind because it's so true. It's so true. And you feel part of maybe a tribe or whatever the case may be
Yeah.
that connects you. I had no idea about BMW and it makes so much sense. It's true. When your lease is over, are you going to renew another lease?
Right. And that's the game that you see all these car companies playing, right? Which is they're trying to either conquest and steal. Mercedes wants to steal a BMW customer. At the same time, BMW is trying to defend their brand equity, right? And depending on what your brand image is, they're going to show, a lot of it is showing images of people in scenarios that the target audience would like to be, right? Like they show the nice car driving up to the nice house or on the beach, and you're like, oh, I want to be that person. That's what I aspire to. That's the emotional connect that those luxury brands are playing into, or tapping into, I should say.
Blow my mind, Jake. Jake, I want to thank you. Oh, before I let you go,
Yeah.
how can our listeners find you?
Sure. MediaJel.com. That's MediaJel with a J. We should be pretty easy to find online, LinkedIn, socials. If you want to reach me directly, my email address is jake@MediaJel.com.
Congratulations, by the way. I didn't mention this earlier on winning Agency of the Year at the MJs.
Oh, yeah. You know what? That was really cool. I don't think I'd actually I didn't win it. The company won it, but I actually have, look, I have it. I have the
Yeah,
trophy.
congratulations.
It's pretty cool. I didn't really play sports in school. I was like in marching band, so they don't really get trophies for being in band. And I think that was the first time I ever got to go and get a trophy. So it was very cool. And it was nice to see the recognition. So
Well
thank you.
deserved, for sure.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks so much. I have to have you on board back on the pod, and we need to dive deeper into this because I'm fascinated.
Yeah, pick one topic and we can go deep into it if you want, because it's a big playing field.
For sure. Thanks so much. Talk soon.
All right, thanks, Tommy.
Thanks for listening to the KayaCast podcast. We hope you enjoyed the show. Don't forget to subscribe to our podcast in your favorite podcast app or visit our website to access the full archive of episodes from the show.